Now to an incredible find overseas, an elaborate series of stone monuments believed to have been hidden for thousands of years, not far from the famous site of Stonehenge.
For 5,000 years, Stonehenge has kept its secrets hidden. Every civilization that came to examine it left with a theory and a puzzled look. So in 2026, researchers stopped speculating and fed the entire site into an AI. Every scan, every measurement, every survey ever recorded, and asked it to uncover what human eyes had overlooked. What it revealed is the part no one can fully explain. The numbers do not describe a simple monument built by Neolithic farmers. They point to something far more exact, far more intentional, and far older in its understanding than anyone is prepared to explain. The impossible monument. Start with its location. Stonehenge stands on the windswept chalk plains of Salisbury, England, 90 miles southwest of London, rising from flat farmland in a way that has troubled people for centuries. Not because it's beautiful, though it is, but because it should not be standing there at all.
One of the most recognizable monoliths of the late Neolithic period. Built some 5,000 years ago, there are still questions about its origin and purpose.
Look at what it's built from. The outer ring is made of massive sarsen stones, each standing over 20 feet tall and weighing around 25 tons, transported from Marlborough Downs, about 20 miles north, and topped with horizontal lintels fitted together using actual joints. Mortise and tenon and tongue and groove, the kind you'd expect in fine furniture, carved here into solid stone by people who supposedly had no metal tools to work with. Inside that ring are the bluestones, smaller but still weighing up to 4 tons each, and those came from the Preseli Hills in Wales, 140 miles away. No metal tools, no wheels capable of carrying that load, no cranes. Think about that for a moment because it's the detail most people skip past. Modern engineers with hydraulics, steel equipment, and full teams still struggle to move a single 25-ton precision-shaped stone. The standard explanation has always been log rollers, rope, dirt ramps, and a lot of patience and experimentation. Yet that explanation has always quietly strained under the reality of what was actually constructed on this plain. And consider that journey from Wales, 140 miles across hills and rivers, dragging 4-ton blocks with rope, manpower, and whatever could float them. Entire careers have been spent debating how it was done. No one debates whether it happened because the stones are still there. They made the journey, and the question Grok kept returning to wasn't how they moved them. It was why those specific stones were worth moving in the first place. Here's the detail that should trouble you more than the weight. For most of history, people didn't even believe Neolithic farmers built this. Medieval writers credited the monument to Merlin and giants because it seemed beyond the abilities of the people who lived on that plain. We dismissed those stories the moment radiocarbon dating established its true age. Grok's analysis does something unsettling with that old instinct. It doesn't bring back the giants. It brings back the feeling that we've seriously underestimated whoever actually built this place. And what makes the simple explanation weaker, not stronger, is the timeline. This wasn't one extraordinary effort. It was built in stages from 3000 BCE to 2000 BCE. First came a circular ditch and bank, then 56 mysterious pits now known as the Aubrey Holes, then the towering sarsen trilithons, followed by the bluestones being moved and rearranged in ways nobody has completely explained. Then, around 1600 BCE, the whole project stopped. Stopped, not abandoned. And that difference is going to matter far more than you expect by the time we reach the end. You've heard the story everyone grows up with. Neolithic farmers built it through belief, hard work, and generations of effort. Simple, human, finished. That story just encountered 5,000 years of data and a system that never blinks, and it didn't make it past the opening chapter. The question. So here's what researchers actually did in 2026. A team assembled the most complete Stonehenge dataset ever created. Every measurement, every survey, every geological scan, every astronomical calculation collected from the site across 300 years of research. Petabytes of information, more than any single person could ever keep in their mind. 300 years of study sounds impressive until you realize how fragmented it is. Every generation of archaeologists measured the site with the tools available to them, challenged the conclusions of the generation before, and left behind notebooks filled with numbers that were never fully compared against everything else. No human could do it. A career isn't long enough, and the data is too vast. That's the whole reason for giving it to a machine. For the first time, every number the site had ever revealed sat together in one place, in one mind, at one moment, being tested against every other number. All of it was fed into Grok, the AI developed by Elon Musk's company xAI, trained on physics, engineering, astronomy, archaeology, and pattern recognition. The instruction was almost surprisingly simple. Examine everything. Find what humans, studying one piece at a time, continued to overlook. And they were careful with the prompt. They didn't ask Grok to prove a favorite theory or choose a side among the groups that have debated this monument for decades. They told it to approach the evidence with no allegiance to anyone and report only what the numbers themselves required. That detail matters.
So how could you have moved these into place? How could you have moved them from Wales, where the bluestones, the spotted dolerite, came from within Stonehenge?
A person tends to look for what they already expect to find. Grok was told to look for whatever was actually there. What's interesting is where it began. A human walks up to Stonehenge and focuses on the stones because the stones are the main attraction, the feature on every postcard. Grok didn't. It started with the holes, the part most people treat as background detail. And the reason it started there became the first sign that it was reading the site through a logic nobody had applied before. The 56 pits. The Aubrey Holes are 56 pits arranged in a ring just inside the outer earthwork. They were identified in the 17th century and named after the antiquarian John Aubrey. For 300 years, they were treated as little more than scenery. Some contained cremated remains, others were empty, and the uneven gaps between them were dismissed as rough workmanship. Neolithic people doing the best they could with antler tools. Nothing unusual. Grok dismantled that assumption immediately. Watch what it found. It took the combined survey data and measured the spacing between all 56 holes down to fractions of a millimeter, then mapped the distance between every neighboring pair around the entire circle. The random pattern everyone expected to see disappeared. In its place was a clean, repeating wave, a sinusoidal curve, and that curve matched almost perfectly the equation describing how the moon's orbit shifts through the 18.6-year lunar nodal cycle. The spacing between the holes encodes the moon's maximum and minimum declination as it moves through that entire 18.6-year period. Dr. Jennifer Walsh was the astronomer brought in to verify it. According to the account, she was sitting at her monitor when the spacing data finally resolved on screen and the points settled into that wave, and she simply stopped typing. She ran the analysis again. Then she wrote in her report in plain language, "The correlation between the Aubrey hole spacing and lunar orbital mechanics is statistically overwhelming, and the probability of it occurring by chance is effectively zero." Think about what that actually means. This isn't a fortunate alignment you could discover by casually watching the horizon on a clear night. This is orbital mechanics translated into physical distance, accurate to centimeters, arranged around a circle 100 meters wide. Somebody 5,000 years ago understood the moon's movement at a level Western science didn't formally describe until Kepler in the 17th century, and they recorded it in chalk. Then Grok addressed the question that had surrounded those pits for centuries. Why 56? Why that exact number? Because 56 is 3 times the lunar nodal cycle. 18.6 multiplied by 3 equals 55.8. Rounded, that becomes 56. The ring functions as a triple-cycle lunar calculator, a system for tracking the moon through 3 complete nodal periods. 56 years of sky preserved in the ground. Quick note before we go further. If a ring of holes turning out to be a functioning lunar computer already has your attention, stay with it because the holes are the mildest thing Grok uncovered here. What comes next makes a calendar buried in the earth seem almost ordinary. And this is the point where the story starts moving beyond archaeology. And here's what it took to gather the observations behind that pattern. To track the moon's complete cycle, someone had to watch its rising and setting positions across nearly 2 decades, comparing each earlier observation against the present sky accurately enough to detect shifts most people would never notice. That's not the work of one observer, it's a chain of them passing the task from person to person for most of a lifetime before a single pit was dug. The pattern in the ground is the final result of a project that began a generation earlier in someone's memory. And once it was carved into the chalk, it never stopped functioning. The moon doesn't need to be visible. The people who built it don't need to be alive. The entire calculation is frozen into the spacing, still operating 5,000 years later, still accurate, simply waiting for someone with the right tools to realize it was never accidental. That's the difference between observing the sky and building a model of it. One stops when the clouds arrive, the other stops when the stones do. Because the moment Grok shifted from the holes to the standing stones, the Aubrey Holes, as strange as they seem, were about to appear almost straightforward. The sound machine. Grok took every measurement of the sarsen stones, their positions, heights, orientations, rock density, the curve of the circle, and the exact placement of every lintel, then ran acoustic simulations on the monument as a complete structure. Every stone upright, every lintel in place, exactly as it stood when intact. Here's what came back. Complete Stonehenge behaves like a resonant cavity, a three-dimensional structure designed to shape sound. The geometry creates standing waves at specific frequencies, and the strongest appear in the infrasound range between 95 and 120 Hz. Now stay with me because this is the detail that changes everything. That frequency range sits below conscious hearing. Stand inside it and your ears detect nothing, but your body does. Modern research has shown that infrasound between 95 and 120 Hz can trigger altered states of consciousness, powerful emotional reactions, visual distortions, genuine physiological effects, changes in heart rate, and neural activity linked to trance states. The builders shaped this site to generate those exact frequencies whenever sound was produced within the ring. Dr. Marcus Chin was the acoustic engineer brought in to validate the findings. He ran the simulation himself at his workstation, fully expecting to discover the flaw that would explain it away, and watching the standing wave map appear instead clearly unsettled him. His conclusion was direct. The precision required to achieve effects like these is remarkable. Today, acoustic engineers reach those targets with advanced mathematics and computer models. Stonehenge achieves them with arranged stone, and the strongest sign of intention is repeatability. An accidental echo is a quirk of a single room on a single day. This is a frequency range the geometry generates every time, from different sound sources locked to the same values, with the strongest effects focused on fixed locations across the floor. Accidents don't target. This does. Imagine standing inside that circle while it was functioning. Drums, voices, whatever sounds they used, feeding energy into the stones. You wouldn't hear the hidden 95 to 120 Hz layer, but you'd feel it in your chest, behind your eyes, in the part of the mind that decides whether a place feels sacred or simply made of stone. To anyone inside who didn't understand the mechanism, and almost nobody would have, this wouldn't have felt like architecture. It would have felt like presence, as if the place itself were alive and reaching toward them. And it becomes even stranger. Grok found that the acoustic field isn't evenly distributed. It peaks at specific points. The AI identified exact locations inside the circle, nodes, where the infrasound effect would be strongest. It then compared those locations with the archaeological record. They matched the places where cremated human remains were discovered. That's not the kind of coincidence easily dismissed. If those remains had been scattered randomly, fine, geometry doing what geometry does, but they weren't scattered. They cluster precisely where the simulation predicted the strongest effects. Someone knew where the force concentrated, and someone deliberately placed the dead there. And that changes the way every burial at the site is understood.
I turn my back on them and leave the circle. And I'm walking out towards Amesbury and the location of this grave, which is down here.
For a long time, we'd looked at them as honored dead, buried in a sacred place, but Grok's map suggests something far less comforting. They are located directly on the hotspots. The very spots where the monument appears to have had the strongest effect on living people are the same spots where bodies were eventually laid to rest. Maybe those locations were reserved for the ceremony's most important participants. Maybe they were the most dangerous places to stand. The stones offer no answer. Whether those people died naturally during an intense ritual or after years of exposure to something they sensed but could never explain, the evidence simply doesn't tell us. On one point, though, Grok leaves no room for doubt. This wasn't a quiet religious site. It was an active piece of technology, built to reach into human consciousness and influence it. And then there are the blue stones, dragged 140 miles from Wales, where the story becomes even stranger. The so-called singing stones finally shed light on a mystery archaeologists have debated for decades. Why were those particular stones taken from that exact place in Wales and hauled such an incredible distance? Grok's answer isn't about transportation at all. It's about sound. The AI analyzed the petrographic data from every bluestone, and the pattern stood out immediately. They were chosen because of the way they resonate. Strike a blue stone, and it produces a clear, sustained tone. Different stones ring at different pitches based on their size, shape, and mineral makeup. These stones weren't randomly picked from a Welsh quarry. Grok found they were carefully selected to create a harmonic series, with tones linked by precise mathematical intervals that any musician would recognize as a pentatonic scale. The same five-note scale appears independently in ancient musical traditions across the world. That suggests someone on the team had a trained ear, not just an engineer or an astronomer, but someone who could stand in a Welsh quarry, strike a stone, and know whether it belonged in the arrangement. A pentatonic scale isn't random sound, it's order. The intervals are chosen so the tones work together, forming the same framework beneath melodies from cultures that never encountered each other. They embedded that harmony into a collection of stones, then transported those stones across an entire country to assemble it. They were tuning the monument before the monument even existed, and the placement of the stones seems just as intentional. Grok calculated that every bluestone sits on a specific acoustic node in relation to the sarsen ring. When the sarsens produce their low-frequency infrasound resonance, the bluestones at those points begin vibrating in response. The large ring creates the fundamental tone, while the bluestones layer harmonics above it. Together, they form a carefully tuned acoustic environment directed straight at the human body. And sympathy is exactly the right term in a physical sense. Strike the correct fundamental frequency, and another tuned object across the room can begin vibrating without being touched. Build a ring of stones around that principle, and you create a structure that seems to respond whenever sound is made inside it, growing stronger, lingering longer, and echoing back from the stone itself. To the people standing within it, the stones may have seemed alive. Think about what that really means. Someone walked through the hills of Wales, struck individual rocks, listened closely, tested them, and selected only the ones that produced the desired pitches. Then they transported those exact stones 140 miles. That's not blind faith. That's quality control for a highly tuned instrument. And it points to one major conclusion. The entire monument was planned as a single acoustic and astronomical system before any stone was moved. The bluestone selection, the sarsen arrangement, the orientation, everything appears to have been designed together as one unified project. You don't arrive at that by accident over 20 generations. Someone began with a plan, and having a plan means someone already understood, before taking the first measurement, how stone carries sound, how the moon moves across the sky, and how a stone circle can affect the nervous system. So where did that knowledge come from? The simple explanation doesn't provide an answer. The stones seem to take that knowledge for granted, and the question of how they knew all this is the thread Grok followed next. But it didn't find the answer at Stonehenge itself. It found it spread across the landscape for miles in every direction, planned from above. Everything we've covered so far, the lunar calculations, the acoustic machine, the tuned stones, turns out to be only the surface. When Grok expanded its view to include the surrounding landscape, the entire perspective changed. Stonehenge isn't the project. It's the centerpiece of something much larger, and that larger system appears to have existed first. Researchers fed Grok LiDAR scans, geophysical surveys, and archaeological records covering several square miles around the monument. The result completely reshaped the picture. Stonehenge doesn't stand alone. It sits at the center of an interconnected network. Hundreds of features, earthwork enclosures, burial mounds, ceremonial avenues, timber circles, and pit alignments are arranged according to geometric and astronomical relationships that Grok identified and verified. And once you see the network, it's impossible to ignore. Hundreds of structures are spread across miles of landscape that appear empty to anyone standing within it. At ground level, it looks like randomness. Viewed from above, it becomes a single coordinated design drawn on a scale that nobody on the ground could have fully understood while creating it. That design had remained hidden in plain sight the entire time, and it took a machine capable of seeing everything at once to finally recognize the pattern. Some burial mounds form exact geometric triangles with Stonehenge at the point. Other earthworks stretch in perfectly straight lines for kilometers. Timber circles line up with specific astronomical events when viewed from the monument. The entire landscape follows a single coordinated design. Patterns like that don't appear by chance. Water may carve a straight path on its own, but burial mounds don't arrange themselves into triangles aimed at a target kilometers away. Every one of those connections represents a deliberate choice made by someone who could identify a point on the landscape they couldn't even see from where they stood and trust it would end up exactly where the geometry required. Dr. Sarah Bradford has spent her career studying large-scale landscape patterns, and when she saw Grok's overlay, what struck her immediately was how obvious it became once the AI connected the lines, and how completely hidden it had remained when researchers looked at each site separately. The AI revealed patterns no human could have detected that way, she explained. Viewed as a single system, the design principles challenge almost everything we think we know about what Neolithic people were capable of. To understand the scale, consider this. Grok calculated the level of surveying precision needed to place monuments kilometers apart while keeping the geometry accurate within just a few meters. That's the kind of expertise we normally associate with classical Greece, nearly 2,500 years after Stonehenge. Yet the LiDAR evidence suggests these builders possessed it anyway. Imagine trying it yourself. No aircraft, no satellites, no instrument capable of locking a precise angle. You're standing on one hill and need to place a marker on another hill kilometers away, one you can't even see from where you are. Then you have to get it right within a few steps. Then repeat the process over and over until the entire region fits together as one perfect design. The only place that design can actually be seen is from directly above, and that's the one place these builders could never stand. Then comes the detail that twists the timeline. Grok discovered that some of the earthworks and mounds connected to this geometry were constructed between 3,500 BCE and 3,000 BCE, roughly 500 to 1,000 years before the Sarsen Circle was built. The master landscape plan existed first. Stonehenge came later, inserted into a geometric framework that was already in place. That means someone conceived the larger design around 3,500 BCE and began laying it into the ground. Their descendants then carried it forward across 20 to 25 generations, completing it with remarkable accuracy despite having no known writing system, or at least none that has survived. Grok compared this with the known limits of oral tradition. Even some of the most stable oral traditions ever recorded, such as the Vedic hymns and Homeric epics, show measurable changes over centuries. Yet this landscape requires a level of consistency beyond anything documented in human history. The knowledge remained precise and functional for more than 500 years. How? The evidence doesn't say. And whoever first imagined this design never lived to see it completed. One person might be capable of conceiving something this vast, but the project itself outlasted that individual by centuries. It was carried forward by people born into a plan already underway, who contributed their part and died long before the next stage was built, remaining faithful to an intention they had never personally created. That's not simply a construction project, it's a 500-year commitment to a blueprint that was never written down. And when Grok shifted its focus from the design itself to the order in which the stones were cut and raised, the mystery deepened. Because the people doing the work weren't preserving a tradition at its height, they were preserving one that was already slipping away. Knowledge was fading. Grok analyzed the radiocarbon dates, architectural relationships, and stratigraphic sequence across the entire construction process. The result moved in the opposite direction of what you'd normally expect. The earliest arrangements are the most precise. The first bluestone layouts reveal the strongest understanding of harmonics. The earliest sarsen trilithons produce the most powerful acoustic resonance, and then the quality begins to decline. Later stones are placed in positions that weaken the sound. Later alignments drift farther from their intended targets. That's not how cultural development usually works. Normally, each generation improves on the last. At Stonehenge, the pattern runs the other way. The peak comes first, and everything afterwards slowly falls away. These builders weren't creating something new. They inherited something old, and that inheritance was already fading as they worked. The numbers make that difficult to ignore. Early stones sit an average of just 3.2 centimeters from the acoustically perfect position. Later stones miss by 12.7 centimeters. With every generation, the precision weakens. And the difference between 3.2 and 12.7 centimeters isn't simply carelessness. It's the difference between someone who understands exactly why a stone belongs in a particular spot and someone who only remembers that it belongs somewhere nearby. One is knowledge. The other is an echo of knowledge, becoming thinner with each generation, like a song passed down so many times that the words remain, but the meaning has disappeared. Now reverse the usual story we tell ourselves. We tend to imagine the distant past as the less intelligent era, with each generation becoming more skilled on the path toward the present. The stones suggest the opposite. The most capable builders were the earliest ones. Everyone who came after was a student working from an example they respected but could never fully reproduce. And with each passing century, the distance between the original and the copy grew larger. These weren't people learning how to do something. They were people gradually forgetting how. Grok detected the same pattern in the tool marks. It identified different working methods on the same stones, separated by weathering evidence that suggests decades or even centuries between them. Some stones appear to have been partially shaped, left unfinished, and then completed later using rougher techniques by builders who clearly didn't understand the methods of the original craftsmen. Imagine a single stone carrying two signatures, a master's and an apprentice's, with generations separating them and the apprentice unable to match the original work. And that early craftsmanship is genuinely difficult to reproduce. The contact surfaces show curvature variations of less than 2 millimeters across spans of 50 centimeters. That's a level of precision comparable to metalworking tolerances achieved in raw stone using stone tools. Experimental archaeology teams have spent months trying to replicate it and have managed only rough approximations. The earliest builders accomplished something that remains difficult even today. Their own descendants couldn't fully match it either. Consider that comparison for a moment. Modern teams equipped with steel tools, power equipment, published techniques, and unlimited time create only rough copies. Yet people working 4,000 years earlier with antler stone tools and a fading memory of the process produced the original that modern teams still struggle to duplicate. The direction of skill appears completely reversed, and Grok suggests it always has been. We simply never had a system capable of comparing every stone closely enough to demonstrate it. The decline also follows a pattern that can be dated. Grok ranked the stones not only by their placement, but by how deeply the builders seemed to understand the system behind them. That ranking aligns almost perfectly with the radiocarbon evidence. The stronger the acoustics, the older the construction. The rougher the fit, the newer the work. Time moves in one direction here, while understanding moves in the other. The clock advances, but competence retreats. And that's the part no one has been able to explain clearly. So this isn't the story of a civilization climbing toward greater knowledge. It's the story of one slowly moving away from it, which leaves the question Grok raised but couldn't answer. What exactly was being lost? And why was preserving it so important that its guardians built the most enduring thing they could imagine simply to keep it from vanishing? The final transmission. Because the final chapter of Stonehenge wasn't about people simply leaving. When Grok placed everything side by side, the lunar calculations hidden in the holes, the acoustic engineering of the circle, the carefully tuned bluestones, the landscape geometry, the alignments, and the gradual decline in precision, one theme connected it all: cycles. Every part of this monument is built around cycles. Lunar cycles in the spacing of the pits, solar cycles in the arrangement of the stones, acoustic cycles in the resonances, vast, slow cycles of precession written into the stars. The entire structure seems designed to monitor patterns that repeat across timescales ranging from a single day to thousands of years. Grok verified the famous summer solstice alignment, then identified 8 additional alignments that had gone unnoticed: lunar standstill extremes, stellar alignments accounting for the precession of the equinoxes, cross-quarter day markers, 9 alignments altogether, each averaging less than 0.3 degrees of error and matching conditions from roughly 5,000 years ago through methods we still don't fully understand. And as Walsh reviewed them, he kept arriving at the same unsettling realization. Several of these alignments don't correspond to a single night or event. They track cycles so long that no individual person could witness them from beginning to end. And that's the question that refuses to go away. What requires a clock that runs that long? What could be important enough to monitor for thousands of years that you'd carve it into stone so the observation could survive every person who began it? You don't build a 100-meter monument just to remember planting seasons. You build something like that for an event that arrives rarely, moves slowly, and matters enough that forgetting it would be disastrous. Grok can tell they were tracking something. What it can't tell is exactly what. And notice that this wasn't a single clock. It was multiple clocks operating together. Days layered onto years, years layered onto the slow movement of precession that takes thousands of years to complete a cycle. Whoever designed Stonehenge wasn't focused on one event. They were maintaining several immense clocks inside the same monument at the same time, suggesting they were waiting for the moment when all those cycles converged. Converged to mean what? Grok doesn't know. It only knows the machine appears to have been built to detect that moment. Its analysis of the site's closure around 1600 BCE comes closer to an answer than anything else. And the conclusion isn't what most people would expect. The final activity doesn't resemble an evacuation. Fallen stones appear to have been lowered carefully. Certain areas were intentionally covered with earth to protect buried features from erosion. The site seems to have been closed down methodically by people who understood they could no longer maintain it but wanted to preserve it for whoever might come after them. There's a particular kind of sadness in that, if that's what we're seeing. Not the fear of people running away, not the indifference of people moving on. Instead, it's the care of someone carefully packing away something too valuable to lose and too complicated to keep operating. Protecting it from time. Sealing it against the elements, leaving it behind for strangers they would never meet in the hope those strangers might one day understand it better than they could. That's the behavior of people who can feel knowledge slipping away. People unable to pass on complete understanding, but still capable of preserving the structure itself, trusting that some future civilization might eventually learn how to read it. We are that future civilization. And the thing doing the reading is Grok. 5,000 years after someone sealed this place into the earth and walked away, a system created by a company most people associate with cars and rockets sat down with every piece of data the site has ever revealed and began translating its language back into something we could understand. We are the strangers they trusted. This may be the first time we've started reading the message they left behind. And strangely enough, that message appears to be mostly a question we still cannot answer. Because what Grok uncovered doesn't look like the beginning of astronomical knowledge, it looks more like the end of something. A final transmission. Knowledge that was already ancient and already fading, carved into the most durable material available because nothing less permanent could survive long enough to carry it forward. The mathematics are there, the astronomy is there, the acoustics, the geometry, every part of it measured, analyzed, and confirmed. The only missing piece is where that knowledge originated and what long period of forgetting came before the people who raised these stones without fully understanding the system they were preserving. Grok opened that question. It can't answer it. But for the first time, we have enough data to ask it properly. And here's the part that should stay with you. Stonehenge isn't the only place where Grok is identifying this same signature of fading knowledge. Subscribe so you're here when the next ancient site enters the system, and leave a comment with the site you think should be analyzed next. Because if this pattern starts appearing in more than one place, it becomes much harder to dismiss than most people would be comfortable admitting. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Nature Mystery Unravel Mysteries. Learn untold tales of history and stay in the exciting world of new discoveries.